righty. Hey, everybody out there in Internet land. I'm Dave Cobb. Thanks for joining us. I can't believe we have people here. This is pretty great. I'm Dave Cobb. I was the creative director for Men in Black way back in 98 to 2000. Worked for Universal Creative for a couple of years making that attraction, and we're here to celebrate its 20th anniversary in the middle of a global pandemic. So that I think that's what people are going to look back on. When the future audiences watch this archived on YouTube, we can be back when we were in our houses and couldn't go anywhere. We did podcasts and video streams and live streams. So I'm being like the kids, and I have no idea what I'm doing here. So this is very ad hoc. So just know that we're going to kind of answer questions as they go, and I've got some fun stuff to share and show you as we go. Nothing really curated and put together, but stuff I'm going to tease some of the stuff that I'm going to roll out on other posts for the rest of the year. But before we do that, I want to introduce Patrick. Come on screen for a minute. This is Patrick Kling. Patrick is our stalwart director behind all of this. He's pushing all the buttons on StreamYard and making it all happen. He is a professional colleague and longtime friend as well. He currently works as an attraction designer for Nickelodeon. So we've got a couple of team members from the attraction here as well, and we'll bring them up one by one as we start talking. Why don't we first bring up my friend, Andy Garfield. Andy?
Hey, everybody.
Andy Garfield, if you are familiar with the attraction, wrote all of the music for the attraction, which has been some fan favorite stuff. You heard a little bit of it, the clip at the beginning there. And Andy was a very good friend when this came about. We met at Disneyland, right? Did we not?
No, we met when I came over to Landmark to get pictures from my architecture professor for USC in like 1994 or 95.
Right. So we'd known each other for a couple of years, and when the ride came up and we needed music, he was one of the first guys I went to. So, you can chime in whenever you want. And actually, you know what? I'm going to introduce everybody right now, and then we'll just answer questions as we go. Second, we have Tim Bernardi. Tim.
Hey.
There he is.
Wow.
Whoa.
This is very cool.
Timothy Holland Bernardi. Tim was the document controller on this project, which if you don't know these projects, there's a lot of paper and there's a lot of stuff to keep track of. And he was the guy who helped manage that effort. You now work in construction safety, right?
Yes.
So in addition to being document controller and sort of URSAT's unofficial MIB alien attack historian over the years, he has a mind like a steel sieve. So the reason I have him on here is because I'm going to forget people and I'm going to forget stories, and he's going to help me through them because I'm old. So thank you for coming, Tim. We also have Mr. Norm Schwab. Norm, how are you, sir?
Oh, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Happy to be a part of this.
It's been too long. Norm Schwab was our lighting designer for the attraction, and is here to answer those kind of questions. We actually have a couple of questions of that from people already. So I'll start. I know it's these people are digging. There's some nerds on tonight, and I love my nerds. That's not a slander. That's not slander at all. I love y'all, but there's some really good questions so far.
We're ready to help.
All right, so let's get right to it. We've got this huge stream already. Hi, everybody in the stream. I'm seeing all your questions. We'll get to them. I'm going to start with a couple that came off of the Twitter feed because there's people internationally that could not be here because of the time difference. So I asked them to post some Twitter comments. So our very first one, actually, Joe Kleiman from Themed Reality is a writer in the industry. He asks, and Norm, you might be able to help us with them, talk about the set and lighting design, especially how they were used in establishing 3 different worlds: the World's Fair, the headquarters, and sort of in the ride, the real world invasion. What are your thoughts? What do you remember first about coming on board this, Norm?
I remember when we first started talking about how to actually translate, was this the movie? Was this a theme park ride? You and I remember had the amazing conversations where we came up with the basic theme of Technicolor film noir. Like, how do we take film noir?
Yes,
I know that was completely black and white, but really take it into the Men in Black world, which was, all over the place. We were handed that amazing design by Canner Architects the facade that really celebrated, everything, of the time, just really the iconic architecture that included, the World's Fair, which was so prominent in the movie. And really, I mean, that set the tone for so much of the design. Also, it harkened back to like the St. Louis Arch. There was elements of there was just elements of all of that 60s architecture, and that really had a lot to do with the cues, the pre-show, that really was very architectural, but then set the stage for, once you're in there, for really some of our biggest challenges, which was, I mean, the technology and what we were trying to do at the time, which was, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, you tell me, you know more about it, but I felt we were, other than maybe Buzz Lightyear, right? We were, really, it was complete cutting edge with the idea of the type of attraction, the multiple endings, the amazing amount of information that had to be put out within, I know, just our lighting world. It was unprecedented.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
No, I remember, it's funny, I forgot it for 20 years, but I totally remember Technicolor Film Noir, that coming up. And Jimmy Pickering was part of those discussions as well. He was our production designer. And I'm going to have to dig up somewhere some of the architectural, some of the set elevations, the color elevations of some of the sets. Because I think one thing people don't quite notice is it's not real New York, especially like that Brownstone Street. When you look at it, if you look at it in work lights, it's blue. Like the bricks are blue. Like there's, matter of fact, I have a piece of, I dug this out of my archives. I've got a piece of some of the set. This was some of the art direction model. I've got a few of these pieces, and so there is a color story to that ride that Jimmy brilliantly did, and then the set designers Eric Urquejo, David Catalano, Mary Florence Lamcoletta, who is our art director.
Oh my God, all those names.
I know, right? I just got to work with her again, actually, at the Warner Bros. Park in Abu Dhabi. She was one of my art directors there.
Yeah, and I see Eric now in other project too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, and he's still working at
Universal.
Right. So somebody just asked, why are the maintenance lights always on? I don't know. Are they? That they must forget. But the point I'm trying to make about the lights being on is that if you looked at all of those sets in the light of day, as a matter of fact, if you line them up in a timeline from the beginning of the ride to the end, the whole ride goes from hot to cool to hot again. And that was very purposeful. And so a lot of those color choices in the sets were things that you, Norm, had to sort of accentuate and find ways to highlight.
Well, along with the fact that, I mean, beside the sets, really, that at the time, the lighting had to do what we called, the general neutral scene, and what we then called the attract, which was to let you know what to shoot at. We were really trying to help you. And then there were multiple states that if you hit something or if multiple people hit things. So we had an if-then control technology system that, again, was completely new for the time, that had to make so many decisions based upon so much information coming into our control system.
I also remember a couple of the aliens had like specials and gobos on them that were almost like comic book pow, like light.
Oh, exactly.
That would come on when something got hit, because in the gameplay, I mean, the only thing that matters that we figured out in playing was knowing that you hit or missed something. Nothing else mattered. And that had to be as fast as possible. And to be honest, it's gotten faster in certain rides. Like I rode Buzz Lightyear Shanghai about 2 years ago, and it's got this badass system that's just really fast and really, really snappy. And that's what we were going for, but the technology at the time could only do so much. So
I remember the computers that were in those cars. They were gigantic.
Yeah, I mean,
they had to fit on the cars.
Yeah, you could probably run those on your cell phone nowadays. But
exactly. But yeah, go on. Sorry. No. I was just going to say one of my other favorite, lighting stories of that whole project was at the point where there were all those interior lit windows. And I remember when we were starting out, we came up with the idea that our lighting crew at the time, we gave them all rolls of gel and safety pins and black wrap and a variety of other things to adapt to just, pretty basic lights, but told every one of them to go make up a story about who was living inside that window.
That's cool.
And so basically every window had some sort of change to it. Some of it was pink, some of it was cool, some of it. So it gave it kind of a lived-in background internal look. That was most people wouldn't get, but it was like one of my other favorite things was that Hitchcock Rear Window
Oh,
scene in the in Universal. It's it just had a life of its own.
I loved that in the old Hitchcock soundstage show, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah, the Rear
love
Window
that
thing.
set. That was so where the binoculars and the video screens embedded. I love that thing. I also remember we did, and Mary was Mary and Desiree, Desiree Soto, who was our character.
Oh my God, another name, yeah,
another name. Who were key to this was we did a long mock-up that was lighting and sets and characters to see what the lasers looked like and what was recognizable. Like we had to be really careful not to drown out the red laser on the guns, because if you did, you didn't know where you were shooting. So there were just layer upon layer upon layer of complexity with the lighting design that you wouldn't have on another attraction, and we had to take all of that into account as we went. So
I still remember, though, one of my other favorite stories is going into the bathrooms and the tile.
Oh my God. So
I had to bring that up. That's still one of my favorite stories of all time.
There's 2 gags in the bathroom for the attraction that people probably don't notice. One is on the way in, or 3 gags. One is the ladies and gents signs are aliens, and they're very weird and they're hard to decipher, but there's a human person next to them. But the joke is that the aliens it's kind of impossible to tell which one's which. And then we added another door overhead. I think they've since painted it over, but I think it's still there. That is a door over your head before you go into the restrooms, like there's an alien restroom up that way. So that was a weird gag. And then the other gag was, I saw this at a pub in the UK. It's a phenomenon of black and white tiles when they're laid out a certain way with black grout and a certain spacing. They look wonky. They look bent, even though everything is just solid straight. And we thought, wouldn't it be fun after a ride that makes you spin to go to the bathroom and have the bathroom floor make you feel like,
it works. It works.
It works. It works great.
Go on. Sorry.
One other lighting thing I wanted to ask you about. Did you introduce me to the neon on the outside of the attraction?
Well, that's exactly where I was going. That whole outside, which we really wanted. It was kind of the infancy of I hate to use architainment because that's so badly used, but really experiential placemaking. Beside the fact that these were iconic buildings, we really wanted to create with the layers of the different buildings and through color and depth, really a show. And that show was about revealing, what you were about to ride, but really kind of creating this universe and this atmosphere. So we started with pretty bright colors and receded, from magentas and reds back into purples, the very big wall. And at the time we found this product, now we would have done it with, pixelated LEDs, but really all we had was neon, and their LEDs were barely a thing.
Right.
So we found somebody who, through this amazing flow of high voltage energy, created, they called it flow neon.
Flow neon, I remember.
Yeah, and the flow neon really allowed us to do these shooting stars in these great grout lines that canter. The building was stunning. I think it won some awards, but it really, I think, was understated. And I think we created a lot of great lighting that has since been, taken for a lot of the lagoon shows. Now that they project on it, they've slowly chipped away at some of that lighting. For the most part, I think I hate to hear people say that they saw the work lights on, but I think and that might be that from what I know, they haven't done a major conceptual redesign of the ride in 20 years, only updated technology.
Yeah.
I haven't ridden it in 5 years. Maybe you have.
I have. Yeah. Nothing guest facing that's different, but they may have replaced components. Who knows?
Exactly. No, they've had to.
Somebody's asking here, what lighting controller did we use? It was all iTech systems, right? It was the show control.
Yeah, well, it was, at the time, it was an ETC console was pretty basic, but what we used was some Microsoft, spreadsheets that Brad Malkus, our amazing programmer, put together the most amazing if-then, or what-if, basically protocol that iTech put into the show control, and we basically through MIDI communicated with the console through a ton of submasters, 1 million submasters that brought up states. It was, we didn't have anything that was theme park ready, that could handle that many channels, that many subgroupings, and then cobbled together with the fact that every character had to have an enter, an attract, and several hit states.
Yeah,
along with the multiple endings.
Right. Most dark rides have, a set amount of lighting changes per scene, and we had multiples depending on what was happening in the game across 12 passengers in 2 different vehicles. So we
were holding our breath toward the end because we were definitely, making it do things it wasn't designed to do, but it did pretty well.
Somebody just asked, did the lighting ever get tweaked after the ride opened? How much tuning is of it there? Well, attractions, once we're done, we hand over the keys to operations and it's theirs. So there is a show control or show quality assurance within Universal that Universal Creative and the ops people run. And so when they do maintenance, often that'll involve refocusing and regels and making sure everything's working.
And I remember we did come back. Remember there was some characters that didn't get added at first, and we really came back. And I also remember, and again, I don't want to go into too far, but I think that I'm sure you remember, this was one of those classic things where, there was the big battle between operations and creative to trying to get it open. Yeah. And some very big players, I don't know, can I say names? Probably not. But they fought at the right times to basically tell operations, no, don't open the ride till it's ready.
Right.
I remember it was very, very big, statements to, keep the money away for a little bit, but to make it. I remember someone saying, if we open it before it's ready, we'll never recover.
Right. And
they gave us the time.
We had some very, very good, strong leadership helping us with that. They wanted to open almost a month earlier than we did. And I'm so grateful they didn't. And the truth of the matter is it was ready, but we still did. I was there till July, and I was still.
Yeah. Oh, we had programmers there for days afterwards.
Yeah,
like I said, we did come back to do various things, but we did hand it over along with photographic focus charts, and Brad, who lives in Orlando, I know has been back.
Right.
The person that really stepped in for us, though, I'll just whisper his name. No, it was amazing to watch that happen.
We had always felt really very supported by that management. The park was really good. They were very excited for this attraction. Mm-hmm. They really needed it because it was a year after IOA opened and they needed something. And that's why it got greenlit, by the way. Like the reason this was one of the fastest attractions in terms of development in Universal's history. I got hired in fall of '97. Started officially like November, December that year, but really got started January, February '98. The project was called 298. That was the project code because of February '98 was when we really started getting going. But it went from nothing on paper to opening day in 28 months or something. It was a ridiculously fast process, much faster than they normally do. So the fact that we got as much sort of innovation and tech and everything working in the time we did is kind of miraculous. This is one of my favorite comments so far. This is from Mr. Robert Niles of Theme Park Insider, an old friend of Men in Blacks and a friend of mine. I did an old interview with him back in about 2009. If you want to look for it online, it's a pretty in-depth interview about the ride. He said, "Is Dave going to neuralize us at the end of this and pretend none of it happened?" Well, I do have my trusty neuralizer here with me. These are actually from the production of the ride of the pre-show films. So both Rip Torn and Will Smith held these. They don't quite lock anymore. This one does go up and down, and the batteries are dead, so they don't flash. But they were made by Modern Props in Hollywood, who made the original ones for the movies, and they made them just for us. But no, I'm not going to neuralize everybody. I'm actually going to archive this, so this is going to live on my YouTube channel, and so people can watch this later. Let's look into. I'm going to look at some questions here and see what people have to ask. How about, let's see. So much good vintage MIB merchandise. Definitely agree. We need the ride soundtrack. I have made a case for that so many times, and unfortunately, Andy, you're gonna pop in on this one. So we've asked about that, and I think what I'll tell you is certain tracks are going to show up in some of the videos that I make for YouTube as background music, but we talked about that for a long time. We asked, hey, you should release this. This would make a great little album in the gift shop, but no dice.
Well, I'm always flattered when I hear that people love the music and want to have it. It's out there.
Yes. Yes, if you dig deep enough in the internet, you will find it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that you know, it's gonna maybe get a little bit easier. You know,
Yeah, not for me, but you know, you
but,
know.
I think that it's if you are, you know, worth your salt as a theme park music nerd, you'll get it. You'll find it.
My favorite piece of vintage merchandise that they don't sell anymore are these beauties, these lovely Men in Black boxer shorts.
That's so 2000.
I know. Somebody asked me already, why am I just showing them, and why didn't I actually like wear them and drop my pants to show on camera? But you know,
It's a family.
It's a family show. I got to keep some kind of respectful. Anyway, hi, Jonathan Casson. Jonathan, my friend Jonathan says, how awesome is it working with the incredibly cute people at Sony? They're adorable, including yourself. Sony was actually a lot of fun to work with on this project because they didn't really have any of their properties in theme parks, and so it was a little new to them. So they were mostly hands off. It wasn't a super tight relationship, but they reviewed all the characters, and I went there a couple of times to give presentations and stuff, and they were a lot of fun. So here's a good one from Joseph Padrunas. What are some of the challenges of designing a dark ride with 2 tracks versus 1? Does the interactive element help or hinder those challenges? Okay, well, the first thing to know about the 2 tracks is that was done for capacity. Back up. When we were looking at vehicles for a ride that needed to open in 28 months, we couldn't engineer a new one. So that's why Universal knew they were going to use one of their existing ride vehicles. Originally, in early Blue Sky concept, we looked at the Spider-Man base, which is fantastic, obviously, right? But we set up some laser tag targets and brought laser tag guns on Spider-Man and set up targets in the scenery and just rode the regular ride program. And it was impossible. There was just no way you could ever score anything because it's just so dynamic. So then somebody brought up Cat in the Hat, and we wrote it and went, oh, this is great because it also lets us turn and focus you at things like an Omnimover. So that is really valuable for storytelling. It's valuable for finding targets. So we instantly went with that one. But we knew for capacity reasons, because they wanted this to be a very high capacity, marquee attraction, we had to double up the vehicles. So for the first pass at this in Blue Sky, it was tandem vehicles. It was 2 vehicles in a train that went out together. And it was fine. But somebody said, oh, wouldn't it be fun if the vehicles could shoot at each other? And that was the reason we went, oh, wait, 2 tracks would be really great. But the challenge to 2 tracks is 2 main things. First of all, it eats up a lot of space, because the minute you have one ride vehicle with one motion envelope around it and then another one next to it, like the distance between the left track and the sets on the right is huge. Like it is a 4-lane highway going through that ride. So getting that normal dark ride compression, release, and tight turns so you don't see what's next is really, 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 really hard. It's great for big reveals like the spaceship crash scene and the brownstone set with the big eyeball and the tentacles. All that seems really great, but we had to manufacture sort of compression moments, which is like the alleyway and the fish shop where the vehicles split up, the scene inside the tunnel in Central Park. All of that came organically out of the problem that you can't do a lot of the same dark ride tricks you normally do with that big a track. The second thing is vehicle speed, because when you go around those big turns, the vehicles can't go the same speed, because the one on the outside has to haul and go a lot faster to stay in line with the vehicle on the inside track. So the logic of that ride control system, Joel Kagan was our ride manager, and a company called MTS built that vehicle. They also built Cat in the Hat. They also built did the engineering for the original Indiana Jones vehicle at Disney. Or did the testing for it, I believe. They did the testing mechanism. That's it. They do vehicle testing rigs, and that's how they got into the attraction industry. Anyway, that was a math problem. That was a massive math problem, because getting the vehicles to line up consistently and stay lined up during the ride was very, very, very difficult. It was not easy. Somebody said, Casey Wood says, very important point of tension in my office. Is it or is it not cheating just shooting your own fusion exhaust port? Oh, Casey, I do it all the time. So say Dave says it's fine. I think it's fine. If you want the points, do it. Speaking of which, this is a Fusion Exhaust Port target cover. This was a test pour of one of the acrylics that was being used, so I kept it. I can wear it as a hat sometimes, and shoot at it as well. This is one of the guns, original noisy cricket. Our noisy cricket is obviously a little bigger than the movie, but these were made by a company called Heads Up Technologies out of Dallas, Texas. They do laser tag arenas. They actually also did the gaming system and gun system for the first 2 Buzz Lightyears for Disney. Let's see. Well, let's scroll down. Are they any hit? Tankard 150. Hi, Tankard. How are you? It says, are there any hidden sensors on the big bug? Yes, there are targets on the big bug. They're sort of all over his head, and there's a few embedded near the giant moving claws. The telltale thing is the sensors have a mesh over them, so you can kind of see them. We tried to color match them as best as possible with the sculpted parts of each character, but they sort of stand out as little dots. But yes, there are targets on that. Let's see, where are we? We got a lot of questions coming up. How did the MIB concept evolve from the other attractions pitched for that site? Well, Patrick put a frozen one of my face up there. I am right there. It's me on a stick. I'm drinking, by the way, just so y'all know. Papa's having a White Claw while we're doing this. So,
Cheers to you.
Cheers to you, Patrick. Everybody, cheers, 20th anniversary. Oh, by the way, speaking of booze and Men in Black, because we can't all be there for the 20th anniversary, I have a feeling, I've already talked to Andy about this, and I think he's on board, and Tim's on board for this. I want to do the attraction's 21st anniversary next year, because the attraction will be of legal drinking age. And Tim's laughing. You approve, don't you? So here's what I want to do. Yeah, here's what I want to do. We'll all meet up there, and we'll make it like a meet and greet with everybody. We'll invite whoever wants to go. We all ride, and we record our scores, and then we drink around the park for a couple of hours, and then we ride again and compare scores, compare sober to drunk scores. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'm going to wind up on the wonky bathroom floor tile. Yes, bring it. Absolutely.
Entire ride.
So April 2021, nerds, mark your calendars. I'm going to have an informal meet and greet for the attraction's 21st anniversary to make up for us not being able to be there today. So
I just see this train of people walking around the park and then looping back. That's fantastic.
It'd be great. That'd be great. Let's see. More Than Thrill says, Dave Cobb makes it clear an entire book can be written on this attraction. You know, we talked about it. We have to, after all these attractions, we always talk about, oh, we got all this great artwork. We got on the series. We should write a book, and then you're on to the next project, and it never happens. So that's why we do things like this. So how did the concept evolve from other attractions? So originally the site was going to be Jurassic Park. This is where the Florida version of Jurassic Park, like the one in Hollywood, was going to go until Islands of Adventure made it a whole land. So, and then after that, there was a couple different attractions. There was an Apollo 13 coaster that was going to go there for a while. John Murdy of Halloween Horror Nights fame worked on an attraction because he was with Universal Creative for a long time. He did a Stephen King attraction there. There was a horror-based dark ride, also using the same ride vehicle. It really comes down to focus testing, like and pitching to the executives. But they focus tested everything that was developed for the site. And we did focus tested early versions of the Men in Black concept, which were not exactly open, but it was it's more about focus testing the overall experience in the brand. And the feedback from the focus testers was, oh, Men in Black. And it makes sense, right? Because Men in Black is the widest possible demographic. It's got enough thrills to be thrilling, but it's also very right for kids and what we call a sort of pink knuckle attraction, because it's not too scary. Grandma can ride it, still have fun. So I think it was it had a lot to do with the audience. And what that park needed from an audience perspective had a lot to do with why it was chosen. If I could go back and change one tiny thing, only I would notice. Oh, that's a good one. This is, I don't know if I want to say this one. So the arch up front, and I think Tim remembers this too. The arch out front, whoops, there we go. There's no. So that the arch out front, there was an engineering mistake. It's him, if I'm not mistaken, at the top.
Yeah.
And most people don't notice it. Most people give it a pass.
Yeah, every time I look at it.
I can't not see it. And now for all of you, look at the curve at the top. It's irregular and it's lopsided because they got the math wrong on the steel bend. And so they topped it and finished it, and we went, oh,
yeah,
no. And the designers couldn't unsee it. Like, we could not unsee it. And now when you look at it, you'll be like, oh, right, it's crooked.
It's kind of like the Stratosphere in Vegas. I see where they stopped it for a while and then started it, and you see that exact same thing, but
yeah, right, like,
very large.
Color difference.
And now the ride experience is ruined for the 131 people who joined us tonight.
Right, exactly.
A wonderful celebration this has become.
So yes, let's see. What else do we have? Urso, hi Urso, how are you? Is there anything I'd add to the attraction to incorporate the sequels? Oh, well, so let's just talk about the sequels. The second one sucked, so let's just dismiss that one. I'm not a fan of the second one. I thought the third one was brilliant. I love the whole sort of time travel and 60s mod sort of angle on it. They've never approached me, obviously, and I don't know if internally they ever had discussions. And then I would have hoped that after Men in Black International, they may have given it a refresh, but I don't think the movie was a big enough hit. So maybe, who knows? That's a question for Universal and Sony. I certainly would like, I'd go back and maybe reshoot the pre-show or something and bring in the new stars. That's an easy way to refresh it. Maybe change some of the targets. Who knows? Are there any? Oh, wait. So what was that question before, Patrick, from Joe? I missed that one. Rob McCullough Express riders have almost seen the attraction more than once, so hopefully they've caught it at least once. They definitely missed a lot. What does that reference to, Joe? I'll get back to that. I got to scroll back and see these. Are there any hidden secrets and references that even the hardcore fans haven't noticed? Okay, so you all know Frank the Pug is in there. He's in the locksmith shop on the right after the crash. That was a request from Mr. Spielberg himself. We got to pitch him the ride and show him all of our maquettes and all of the designs. And because he's a creative consultant for the Universal Parks, I was 29 at the time and had half an hour long meeting with Steven Spielberg at Amblin, shaking in my boots, pissing my pants. But he was the nicest guy, and half an hour turned into almost 90 minutes. He kept waving off his assistant going, "This is cool, let's talk some more." It was like, I could die happy. That was one of my best personal professional moments in my life. But he, of course, has a laundry list of things, like suggestions. And some of them are easy. Some of them are like $3 million ideas, and you just write them down and go, "That's a great idea, Mr. Spielberg. Thank you very much." And then you go back and rally the troops and see what you can add. And so he asked for Frank the Pug. There is another detail that the head on the stick that the three aliens are looking at when they're reading the paper, that's actually Steven. Like, he told us make that him. So we did a sculpt of him and gave it a beard and a baseball cap and all that kind of stuff. Tim, what other hidden secrets? What are there any other Easter eggs? Well, okay, there's an Easter egg that came up on Twitter today. This is, people on Twitter didn't realize this, and I couldn't believe it. So the towers out front are based on the observation towers from the '64 World's Fair, right? Right. And at the World's Fair in Flushing Meadows, there are 3 of them, right? And one of them is a little bit lower, and you don't see it amongst the top 2. And in the movie, Edgar steals the top one, breaks it off.
So ours had only 2 with the 3 poles.
Right. And so when we were designing the attraction, we knew we wanted the towers as an icon, but we knew we had to break one off because that's a great gag, right? It's after the movie. It's turned into a spaceship. But one didn't seem balanced. It didn't look right. And so when you don't really see all 3 in the movie, but there are 3 there. The third one's just very low. So we took some dramatic liberty and moved it up. And so that it works as 2 things. When you see the attraction and you cursorily know the movie, oh, it's those towers at the end that turned into spaceships. If you really know the movie and you know the inspiration of the original towers, you know that one of them is gone. And everybody on Twitter today was like, in all the years I've been going to that attraction, I never noticed the top of that thing is all broken. Like, we even have, I think we have like broken wires up there. We talked about strobe lights and stuff up there for a while, like it was still fritzing. I don't think that ever happened, but can't hear you, Tim. That's all right. That's all right. We'll get back to him. We'll get back to you. Brian Acquired says, what design software was used for the scenery? Aspiring set designer. Hi, aspiring set designer. The same software that everybody else uses. Things like CAD, AutoCAD. right? A lot of the set design is done by hand drafting first. You do concept sketches and early schematic is hand drawn. So old school architecture and set design techniques. But nowadays, all of the tools, there's no special set design software just for theme parks. It's everything they use in theater. So AutoCAD, Vectorworks, Maya, 3D modeling, all of that is in play in anything we design right now. So learned it all. Hi, Rob McCullough. How are you? Does it bother me that the ride was built right before the addition of Universal Express such that the route for Express guests bypass so much of the story? I think Express riders miss out so much. I could not agree more. And it was one of those things that was percolating while we were designing the ride, but had not been designed for the park and rolled out shortly thereafter. And we were like, we would have made it very different, guys. We would have done our own elevator or something for it, you know. So no, it does bother me a little, but let's see. How about Mr. Craigs? Was Alexander Craigs? Hi, Mr. Craigs. How are you? Was the speed of the ride vehicle's rotation sped up or slowed down after testing? We did have a slightly more aggressive spin profile in original programming, but it wasn't toned down very much. That came about not just because of intensity, but so they do on a lot of rides you bring in. There used to be a guy that we called the ride doctor. He just passed away a couple of years ago, I think. His name was, get this, his name was Doc Brown. His name was like Dr. Robert Brown. And he was a spinal surgeon, I think, out of Ohio. And he'd bring his accelerometer and he'd strap it onto coasters, and parks would use him to measure their rides to make sure it wasn't going to hurt anybody. We used him when I worked on Back to the Future. That's how I met him. And he came in and tested our ride. And there was a level of intensity for the height requirement that he recommended against. So it was dialed back just a little, like a little bit. Whether they've changed it since then, I don't know. And that's, again, it's up to I don't work for Universal anymore. It's up to them for the park. Greg Minion, one of the best aspects of MAB Alien Attack is the interactivity and rewritability. Do you see any similar future projects on this scale? Yes, I think that guest agency and the role that guests have to play is certainly something in modern attraction design that is a trend. Look at, Millennium Falcon over at Disney. The interactivity is going to be something we have to deal with. It's not always easy, and making sure everybody has a good experience, even if they suck at the game, is a problem. And we were dealing with that back in 2000 on Men in Black, and they deal with it on Falcon as well. So it is something we think about a lot. Alien Attack is the true Men in Black 2. Yes, thank you. That's great. I was not a fan of the second movie. It was more of the same. Eric Willery asks, would we have wanted to add any more to the ride if we'd been able to make it longer? Well, we played with that with the single track version, and it was very long because the track could kind of serpentine. And at a certain point, and it's not that we had set the ride building size either at that point. That came a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, there's always a chance to add more, right? But right now, the ride clocks in at, I think it's just under 6 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. I forget. I haven't looked at it in so long. Maybe a little shorter, 4 to 5, I think is the YouTube videos. But could you? Yeah. But I also think there's benefit in design to restraint, right? You ask any artist that the restraint of their canvas is, you can't look at that as a restraint. You got to look at it as a blessing. You got to look at it as, all right, this is what I got. How do I fill it? And we knew from a size perspective what that plot of land on the park could do. And so that building changed size a little bit during concept, but we had to stay within a certain boundary. So it is what it is. Let's see. Neville Page, ladies and gentlemen, Emmy award-winning creature designer, Neville Page. Neville, thank you for joining us. Where'd he go? Oh, shoot, he'll be back. So this is fun. I wasn't sure if Neville was going to be able to make it. I don't know if you guys know Neville. Neville is a world-renowned creature designer. He designed about half of the aliens and the vehicles and the guns for our attraction. And then after that, there you are, Nev.
I got so excited I hit the wrong button.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
So we both got a lot more of this and a lot less.
Less of this, yeah, and a little bit of this.
And a little bit more of this, yeah. I have. By the way, I've been going through old videos, and I have so many great videos of like vehicle buy-offs and stuff that I'm going to be posting this year. So
I can't wait to see.
Yeah, it's like Baby Dave. It's like Dave and Neville babies. It's like Muppet babies, but us.
I just heard you saying that you were 29 during that Spielberg meeting.
Yes.
Which I can't believe that.
I know.
They were every 29 for
What
one.
what 29-year-old gets the chance to pitch an entire? I mean, pinch me. I at the time I couldn't believe it was happening. I was the luckiest boy in the world to get this.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool meeting.
And then right after you finished working for us, you got to work with him on Minority Report, right?
Yeah, immediately that was the next project with Steven. And you know what was interesting? Every time I've worked with him, he remembers. That's the kind of guy he is. He remembers our names.
Oh.
And he, I worked with him and JJ on Super 8.
Yep.
And it was as if we were back at Amblin pitching Men in Black to him. He's such a gracious guy, and he remembers everything, which is good and bad. So.
He is. People ask me what he was like, and I'm like, he's exactly what you think he's going to be. He's a constant professional. He's a nerd like the rest of us. Yeah. He's extremely passionate. And what impressed me most about him was, for the time that I was in that room with him, and I'm sure you've had the same experience, the time that I was in that room with him, he was there for me. Like, yes. He was present and engaged. And like I said, it was 30 minutes, and he kept waving off his assistant. It was one of the best meetings I've ever had, not just because it was Spielberg, but because it sort of taught me this is what listening and paying attention and giving notes should be, you know? Yep. And he had great notes.
It is refreshing because it plants the seed. You know, not only are we inspired by men like him, but it sets the tone if you're paying attention and you aspire to be in a position of creative inspiration and, dare I say, authority, that you can do it with compassion and grace and kindness. And you know, I've worked with J.J. Abrams quite a bit, who is, of course, of Spielberg genetics in a lot of ways. And J.J. is the same way. It's just like, this is a guy who, you said it best, he was in the room for you. And that's how it should be.
Yeah, he was great.
And that's how I aspire to be.
Well, so designing the creatures for this was sort of a multi-step process. The early concepts, he had numerous artists, Cynthia Ignacio. Oh God, who else? I'm looking at I had a chat today on LinkedIn with a bunch of people from the team, and people kept chiming in. Lots of people who chimed in early on in concept, but then a lot of those went to you, and you had a staff of a couple of different people working on sort of refinement of those creatures and fleshing them out in 3D, right?
Yes. It's interesting because, excuse me, I'm not going to take over the conversation here, but in regards to Men in Black, I wanted to do creatures, but I was hired to do the vehicle.
Right. That's true. Yes.
And the creatures is something I personally wanted to do, but I think you guys were at the point where it's like, we got it covered, like with Cynthia, et cetera. And then it just made sense to have me involved kind of as a creative lead.
Yeah.
But I remember, it might have been you, might have been Phil Hedema, where I was advised, you know, you're going to need some people. Can we suggest this particular artist to work at your studio with you? And I said, anyone you believe in is fine by me. Any friend of yours is a friend of mine. So keep in mind, this is at the beginning of my creature design career. Well, not even the beginning. I didn't have one.
I was your first gig.
It is true. It is true. It began here, and I was recommended a guy named Carlos Fuente.
Oh yeah.
And I thought, don't know who he is, but I trust your judgment. So Carlos ends up at my studio. Scott's in my studio in Culver City, and he's phenomenal, like incredible. And I thought, I guess this is what a creature designer is supposed to do. And then we needed more people. Carlos recommended Jose Fernandez, who is unbelievable.
It was incredible, yeah.
And then that rolled into Jordi Duchel and Jim Cagle. The list goes on, right? So all these guys are in my studio, and I'm just assuming every creature designer is supposed to be at least this good. And unbeknownst to me, I have got the A-listers, and they became my teachers, whether they like it or not.
That's
because the pencil that they used, the paper that they drew on, the way they approached design, I just felt like, well, that's obviously what one must do. So I had the most incredible teachers. right down to Rod Freitas, who was our mold maker, and
Yeah.
he did the Babs 50th scale, a 1 inch equals a foot.
The real bit, the big Babs, by the way,
Yeah.
is what we call the big ass bug.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that thing was molded by an incredible mold artist.
You mean this?
Oh God, there it is.
This is part of it.
Yeah,
So
two of the fingertips.
I have a very funny story about these fingertips. So this was the 50th scale. Like this was it fit into our head scale model. It fit into next to our sets, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So we were there for the folks who don't work in this industry. There's a moment in any project you call value engineering, which literally means budget cuts. It's a fancy way of saying that. And we got to that final scene, and there was budget cuts all over the attraction that we had to go in and value engineer and make some cuts. But again, you don't look at that as negatively. You look at it as, all right, what's the creative challenge? How can we make it better? But it got down to this, and it was these were on the right-hand side of the track.
We had them on both sides.
On both sides, right.
Yeah.
And they were like a second set of prehensile little diggers that and one of them moved, I think. But what happened was we decided, all right, those are going to be cut. And I took them out of the model like this. And they sort of handed out their hand like this, like they wanted them. And I went, these are mine now.
Yep.
I have tons. Actually, what's great is I have a ton of video of that. Let me put some of that on the screen for a moment. This is the kind of stuff people are going to be able to see later this year when I start posting more videos. Is like here's the maquette.
Oh wow,
that giant maquette.
Oh, that's very small one. Yeah, that's a tiny one.
This is the tiny one, right? And then we did people may not know this, but we did a full size mock-up in foam core. Out at Attraction Services, with Ron Griffin at Attraction Services in Valencia, to get a sense of the scale of it, basically. And there's Phil and there's Ron. I think you're in here somewhere. But yeah, so this is the kind of stuff I'm going to have. I'm going to be making videos of for a while. I have all these mock-ups.
Fantastic.
Let's talk about the vehicle for a minute. So, originally when we came to you, the original concept the vehicle was going to be the Ford POS from the movie.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? It was going to literally be the Ford from the film. And we just realized, A, that's not very good looking. B, on that ride platform, it's just impossible. And so I don't remember exactly, but I think my words to you were like, make it look like something industrial but alien powered. And it's like a tough vehicle.
Exactly. And that's how we approached it was. Well, the most important thing was form follows function. I think the reason you hired us was because of our experience with the disabled.
Yes.
Because you wanted a vehicle that could accommodate with the appropriate throughput and safe ingress and egress, various types of wheelchair users, various levels of injury. So Scott Robertson and myself had a lot of experience in that arena. So that's why we got brought on board. And then the aesthetics is obviously something that we should be capable of doing. And when it was the Ford POS, I thought, well, maybe not as exciting to style that, but whatever, it's going to be, I like a good challenge. And then when you posed the idea of industrial utilitarian government issue technology meets alien tech, I thought, that's interesting. And
I posted a picture I think a week or two ago of photo studies we did where we did sort of industrial greens and yellows and things with caution tape and stuff. We tried all that, but at the end of the day, like sleek and sexy black sort of won out,
Yeah, it did. But I had some. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say it was an incredible, fun, very loose aesthetic journey because I was left to my own a lot of the times to just kind of do what we had the time to do.
There were sort of two details that I remember the most. As a matter of fact, I think I have the ride vehicle in photos here. We can sort of look at it while we're talking. There's the details that I remember that stuck out to me were first one would be the front grille, the front grille, and in particular, let me zoom in a little bit here. This here, I remember you pitching me on that, saying that this was the alien tech. It's like eyeballs, like it was this 6 eyes like a spider. So these are the headlights, but those are the eyes. And I was like, I love you. This is so great. And then the second detail I loved was, I think you were the one who pitched us on this idea, which was the fuel tank.
Yeah.
So this was a nightmare, people. What we wanted in that was actual fluid, like green goo that would slosh around, and a sealed tank that wouldn't leak in the ride became a nightmare. I think now they just put in gels and it doesn't move. But the goal was fluid originally.
Yeah, now you would do accelerometers, motivating LCD screens.
and here's some of the. So the other thing you did that as part of the vehicle were the guns. And so these are some of the early studies of how do we fit all the technology in the speaker. This is one of your clay sculpts of the gun and the holster, which the holster we affectionately called the toilet for obvious reasons.
I was so upset when sometimes I can't see the forest for the trees.
Right.
And as soon as somebody brought that up, the toilet, I was like, oh, come on. Now everyone's going to see a toilet. So I was not happy that was a reference point, because it just makes it so hard to overcome. So you know where our shop was, right?
Yes.
And so I had the roll-up door open one day, and we didn't have a lot of foot traffic through there walking by, nor should we, because this is a top secret project, but it was a particularly hot day. And so I'm out with one of the holsters, that I personally like to call it, for the guns. And I'm sanding the final model of the holster. And this husband and wife walk by and they go, oh, it's interesting. What do you do? And I said, oh, I'm an industrial designer, and I'm just working on an interesting prop piece. The next word out of the woman's mouth was, oh, is it like a stand-up urinal? I was like, God damn it. Come on.
Oh, my God.
It's nothing like a stand-up urinal.
No.
At all. How could you even see that? But yeah,
but even down to like, this is an interesting design study, because the lap bar needed what we called a belly pad that needed to encapsulate. So this is going back to something Neville said earlier about wheelchair access. Universal was very, very, very progressive and forward about their need and desire to have the attractions be as accessible as possible. So this ride actually got a patent for how we get people on and off the vehicle. One of the challenges was, how do we get a wheelchair passenger, first of all, without transferring? We wanted to make sure it could take a chair, and multiple chairs of multiple sizes, from speed chairs to standard medical chairs to electric chairs, and not hold up the dispatch rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another mock-up that I'm going to have a video. I have a mock-up of where we looked at how much space the puck was going to take up in the turntable.
Yeah.
So if fans have not seen that loading procedure, it's fascinating. It's in between the load and unload where you can't see, so it's done in private. The passenger is brought on their device to this part of the floor. They are locked down safely with cables and straps, and they take their time. They hit a button, and that thing comes out of the floor and is on casters, and you can roll it up to the vehicle, slide it on, click, quick lock, and it goes. And so it was a sea change in how efficiently you could load a passenger that needed very specific access requirements.
Do you remember when, and I won't say the park or the ride that we did this at, but we needed to test
there you are.
how other people were doing their strapping systems for the disabled.
Yeah.
So we put me in a wheelchair, which is something you do when you're testing out products, even though I'm not disabled.
Yep.
Scott and I knew how to, for lack of a better word, pretend to be, so that when you're testing things, not just accessibility, that's obvious, but in the case of going onto a ride, we needed to know the inefficiency or the efficiencies to be inspired by. And there was one particular ride at one particular park where I was watching this person who assumed I was disabled strap me down in such the wrong way. And I even said to him, I said, are you sure you want to attach the straps to my wheels like that? He said, yeah, you're going to be just fine. When the ride was over, do you remember I was on my side?
Yeah. Yep. I remember that.
On the floor?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember.
Whoops.
Yeah.
And I think I also rode the ET ride like 15 times consecutive. I don't know why it had to be that many, but
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah, so
I
I mean,
got my dose.
all the vehicle design is like, yeah, as you said, it's partially aesthetic, but that's the part that, first of all, I know you would not go to the park, so we were like, go make it cool, but it was like it needed a particular capacity, a particular height, so that and we changed the lap bars within the first year because the single lap bar wasn't working well in terms of encapsulating people. So it's so, this stuff is so complicated, folks. I can't even tell you how many things are at play. And so when you have somebody like Neville involved that is also keeping track of the aesthetic at the same time as well as the human factors, it's a huge boon.
It was a great experience. It really was. And it obviously launched me into the career that I'm in, because having worked with Steven and having him remember me. Do you know the story of why I ended up working in film, mostly as a creature designer?
No.
So real quick, we're doing Men in Black the Ride, and we're doing vehicles and creatures. So I've got this staff of amazing designers, one of which is Jose Fernandez. And he said, hey, on my lunch, I'm going to go next door because there's some friends who are working next door, just a couple doors down. I thought, okay, great. So he goes to lunch, comes back, and he's in the shop sculpting, and there's a knock on the door. And it's this woman who says, I think Jose is working for you. I said, yeah. Well, he left his keys with us at lunch. Can you give them to him? I said, Joe, yeah, certainly. And she pokes her head in looking around the kind of the gallery or the studio. And Scott and I had done a lot of helmets. We did a lot of bike helmets and ski helmets, Nikes, hockey helmets, and all that. A lot of safety gear. So she said, hey, you guys do helmets. I'm working on something right now where we need a helmet designed and built. Is that something you'd be interested in? It's like, oh, yeah, sure. It's something I'm very comfortable with. And she said, okay, let's meet next week or something. My name's Colleen Atwood. And
oh my God, it was Colleen Atwood.
Yeah. And I'm like, cool name, whatever.
Oscar award-winning, folks. Oscar award-winning costume designer. She's brilliant. I've met her a couple times. She's amazing. She is
incredible. And so I didn't know who she was. So I go next door, and it's they're working on Minority Report.
Oh.
And she said, yeah, it's a Steven Spielberg production. I'm like, oh my God, I know him. I didn't say that. But so anyhow, I start working on these helmets, and then they see that there's an opportunity to do bicycles for, future bicycles, which we did a lot of design work, Scott mostly, and wheelchairs and a bunch of other stuff. And then all of a sudden we're doing a ton of prop design and fabrication for Minority Report. And then because of a fluke, I was asked to do Tom Cruise's gloves, these 3-finger gloves.
Oh yeah, the gloves. Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, great. So my first presentation was with Steven and Tom between takes at 20th Century Fox, I believe. And it was just enough time in between Men in Black the Ride and this experience where Steven was like, oh, Neville. I'm like, how does this man know my name? I forgot it. I was like, oh my God, Tony Spielberg, how are you, man? But it's so weird how the dots connect, because not only am I'm of course like you, I was wetting myself with just excitement and glee, but at the same time, you got to maintain some amount of professionalism. But ever since then, Steven has he's just been the sweetest of guys, and I've worked on many different productions with him as a creature designer. In fact, just a month ago, even. So it's just bizarre how that works.
I remember you telling me too. I remember we were wrapping up, and you're like, "Oh, I got this Spielberg job," and I think my first words to you was like, "Great, I'm never going to be able to afford you ever again."
Goodbye.
See you later.
You served your purpose, Dave.
So we got a question from somebody here for you. Do you have a favorite alien you designed for the attraction?
There was a lot. And I would have to say, I think that the Babs was. And it's not because it was the most liberating cosmetically. There were a lot of parameters that made it difficult. You know, it was basically like, we know it was a tunnel. It was a meat tunnel. And how do you style that? And Carlos Huante, he had a lot to do with the aesthetic of that. But what I love about design in general is the problem solving aspect. I don't consider myself the greatest of aestheticians, but I think I'm a good problem solver. And I just loved all the challenges of trying to make that work, that entrance envelope of these two vehicles that spin, and, you know, having to take into account, pardon my hand, take into account the reach of someone. If they reach back and then you spin the vehicle, it's like a large router bit. What would that cut out of the space, and what are you left with, and how do you make that look cool? So for me, that particular creature was one of my favorites because it was the hardest to deal with.
Yeah, that big bug went through so many changes. The thing I missed most was we originally had the inside. Remember, the inside was designed. We had like a palette, like a ripple, and it was all fleshy and gross, and there was like a uvula hanging, and all I got cut because we thought you're going to be spinning, it's going to be fog, but I don't even know if they're doing the fog anymore. But who knows?
Yeah.
Cool. Let me scroll down some other questions here. Stick around though, if anything comes up. If you got time. Stick around.
Yeah, I gotta give the baby a bath. Not a euphemism. I actually have a baby that needs a bath.
Okay. Well then, then if you need to go, that's awesome.
I'll wait a couple minutes if there's a couple questions. Certainly.
Okay, great. Well, let me scroll through and get a couple here. Brandon Santoro says, "Can you speak to the evolution of the attraction story? Were there any drafts that's significantly different from the final product?" To be honest, MIB as a brand is a pretty straightforward story. It's about training. It was Will's. It's your agent's journey, right? And so we knew it was always going to be that. The things that tweaked were what's the inciting incident, the crash prison ship, things like that. The individual gags within the ride of the different aliens happened. We treated it a lot like Mark Davis used to treat Haunted Mansion or Pirates of the Caribbean. We came up with gags for each of the scenes and went and just responded as we pitched to what people liked and what people laughed at. And so those changed quite a bit during the ride. And then that was a question of how do we have building action? We start with the crash, we're under attack, and then it's quieter and we get ambushed. And then, oh shit, the other vehicle across from you has aliens in it. So all of that happened pretty organically. But the framing device for the ride of it being training was always part of it because it really was part of the brand. Let's see. Nick Puglisi, this is funny, and Jeremy seconds this one. It wants to know the story about the building, MIB. What happened? Because it looks like the store looks like an M.
Yes, I'm on camera, so I'm going to say yes, it does.
Yeah, it does. I mean, people ask me that all the time, and it's like I don't think we ever had a B planned, but it was always like a wink. But there was somebody asked later, was there a restaurant planned? And yes, there was actually a restaurant planned, roughly where the restrooms are now, and that got cut because they didn't need it. So, let's see. What's the creative process where Spielberg or Barry Sonnenfeld have any say? As Neville said, yes, Spielberg was in basically one giant pitch meeting for about an hour and a half with me and Phil Hedema, and we pitched him the whole ride. And then he sort of checked in via email. We would send him stuff. He checked in throughout the process and then came in to ride it towards the end. But it's not like he was there every day. But, when Steven's going to look at it and that his feedback up until then has been really meaningful and enthusiastic, of course you want his feedback, right? Barry Sonnenfeld was not part of it. I think we had reached out to him if you wanted to do the pre-show, to direct the pre-show, but his schedule wouldn't allow it, and I don't think our budget would allow it, to be honest. But we had a lovely director do that named Linda Hassani. She directed all the live action stuff, and a little bit of trivia, she was Universal Theme Parks' first female media director for one of the attractions, which I thought was pretty cool.
Dave, do you remember the meeting that we had with Stephen at Amblin? It was you, myself, and Phil.
Yeah.
And he was running a touch late.
Yep.
And he came into the meeting and he started talking about how he just came back from San Francisco because he was viewing some footage of a friend's film. Do you remember that?
I
Because
do.
that rocked my world.
What was it?
He was saying, I mean, I remember I was kind of a fly on the wall in that meeting.
Yeah.
And he was just saying how, I just came back from San Francisco looking at some footage. Friend of mine, he's shooting all digital. So keep in mind the time frame, when this is occurring. He's shooting all digital, and it is really amazing to see. And I said to George, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, he's talking so matter of fact about George Lucas and Star Wars and digital.
Yes. I remember that. He was talking about Phantom Menace. Yeah. Because that was the following year.
It's kind of like sitting in a room with a bishop talking about, I was just with, JC and planning his resurrection. And it's amazing, the wine, the bread.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I completely remember that now. Oh my God. Here's an interesting one. What goes into game design for this or other game-based attractions? Whose job is it to come up with rules, target layout, etc.? Well, this one is easy. It's shoot and score. So the rules were pretty easy. We knew we wanted two things, and this was really hard. Was we wanted the aliens to shoot back at you, and we wanted it to affect the ride, and that's what causes you to spin a couple of times. The funny thing is, in playtesting, we had more moments where you could spin or not spin, but what ended up happening was if you were really good at the game, you had a really crappy thrill ride because you didn't spin enough. And so we ended up finding a balance for that. There's really only one moment where you can possibly get out without spinning, and I think it's after the pawn shop. It's that short spot with all the brownstone streets, I think. I don't remember offhand, but and the other problem with game-based rides was where to put targets, and Neville was part of that effort as well, was like, where do you put targets on this thing? I already had somebody ask me this on Twitter, and that was, if you do one thing different in the ride, what would it be? And I talked at length with Patrick and Andy about this beforehand, about how the targets became a little contentious internally, because we looked at Buzz Lightyear, which had just opened, and Buzz Lightyear has these Z's for Zurg, and the Z is your target. And there was this very split opinion in Universal Creative. Half the people like, you need a target like that for people to find. And then the other half, which is the side I was on, which was like, yes, but the ride becomes nothing but hunting for those targets. And you don't notice the design. You don't notice the aliens. And Men in Black is all about the personality of the aliens, and that's all that matters. I don't want people looking for a target. And so I fought really hard for no targets. And so that became a really hard problem with where do you tell people to shoot. And so part of that is heavy lifting in the queue, where we tell people head to shoulders, target here. You don't run out of ammo, keep firing, just aim somewhere here. And then the second part was adding so many targets to the aliens so that no matter where you're shooting in that, it would pick up. And that becomes a much later problem with things like maintenance, because the mesh that it covers up the infrared will fill with dust, and they have to be cleaned out. And so the short answer is, what I would change differently is do an all digital camera-based targeting system, which is what modern shooting gallery attractions use. They don't actually use infrared targets anymore. They look at the whole scene with a camera, and the camera can see where the lasers fire and trigger a hit or a miss based on digital mats that you define for each character. So, and this is something, I don't know if you remember this, Nev, but we did a test once where we had talked about one of the other problems with gameplay in an attraction is knowing when you've missed something, and that you don't actually have a lot of feedback for when you miss, other than the red dot. And we had talked about for a while, we didn't do a real mock-up, but we did some investigation technology-wise of, if we were to project on one of the sets, and that projection system was a generative, like an old video game sprite animation system that could do a hit or a miss, and then a camera to track where the lasers were, and then we define the hit or miss areas within the camera. And that's how modern targeting systems work on these kind of attractions. But we were ideating then to solve for a different problem, which was, how do we tell people they've missed? And we came up with a theory of a thing that would work, but then we budgeted it out to cover every square footage of set with video projection and cameras. In 1998, especially, not even great projection, was really expensive. It was like $20 or $30 million just to add that feature. But that's the kind of thing we would do differently now. So a couple of people had asked what would we do now if we were designing with modern technology. So that kind of tracking. The other thing I think we would do differently is a trackless vehicle. We would do trackless, that the vehicle could have an alien personality and dodge things. And the greatest part about trackless to me is the vehicle can feel like it has its own agency and get you out of scrapes or get you into scrapes, you know, and giving the vehicle personality would be a big thing I'd do. What would you do technology different wise, Nev, if knowing what we can do now?
Mine would be very expensive, and that would be to not use pneumatics, use hydraulics and motor systems and very sophisticated animatronics.
Yeah.
But you know, it's understood that you've got these pop-ups. And you hit it, and it goes down. It's effective, and it's not like the vehicles are moving. It's a linear experience. So, you know, you don't get to spend too much time with any character. So all of that works. There's you know, from my end, I was very satisfied with the vehicle, but I'd roll with the new tech that's available, and I'm not as versed in it as you by any means. So
I think the other thing about leading, I mean, any attraction designer will tell you if you start with tech, it's the wrong place to start, because you start with the technology and it's going to be out of date by the time you open. So it really is about identifying technologies that can tell a new kind of story. And I don't know what that would be in a modern MIB milieu, you know. This is actually leads to another good question. This I think I'm going to add a couple of people to this question from Brandon Santoro. How did Men in Black influence your personal work on future attractions?
Well, since I've not worked on a attraction since then, I think it's obvious.
To work on things like Star Trek and Super 8, and yeah, I get it.
Neville, you disappointed in your career since Men in Black as a result of your complete failure in the themed entertainment industry, sir.
I was broken at the end of Men in Black: The Ride.
I imagine your family is quite ashamed.
They are.
You failed
I
upward.
worked on Piranha 3D, so
Well, now.
Well, me
but
personally,
yeah, I have since that experience honestly jonesed for another opportunity to work on a theme park ride, but film really has consumed me. Film and TV lately.
What's interesting about this, and I have none of the technical background you did, and it's fascinating listening to Neville speak the way he was. But something that's worth reminding is the effects that were created by the entire team are effects that have to work. What is it, David? Every 8 seconds, as opposed to a film where the effect has to be effective,
right?
Once, twice, 3 times.
Creature design for movies has one take every couple of minutes and long stretches in between where people get to touch it up and change it. These things have to run every 16 seconds all day long.
And we can fix it in post.
Yeah, you can fix it.
Exactly. And then when you listen to what Norm said at the beginning of the conversation, it's not just the amazing work that Neville's team's doing. Norm's lights have to work. Andy's music has to work. And it has to cycle and cycle and cycle. And I added it up. This is tens of thousands of hours since this beautiful machine was turned on.
Yeah.
And what an amazing accomplishment. And to have, if we hadn't had the talent of people like Neville and so many other people, this theatrical production wouldn't be as amazing as it is.
Yeah, I mean, the time constraint alone, we made it up as we went along. So
I learned so much from people like Frank Wygand, if you remember him.
Oh, Frank, he was our unit of measurement, Dave. Remember, standing next to the big eyeball.
For the folks who out in the audience, Frank Wygand, and if you're out there, Frank, watching, God love you.
Yeah,
Frank,
no kidding.
Like, please. Frank Wygand is a ride engineer. He's a consultant for the theme park industry that consults on very tough engineering challenges. I mean, the latest thing he did a lot of work on was all the crazy engineering and Rise of the Resistance and Falcon over.
No surprise.
No surprise, right? But he helped us figure out a lot of the technical problems for this ride, and he is a genius of a man and the nicest. I think I have a great picture of him actually. Nicest, sweetest guy. But yeah, this is an industry where a lot of people ask me, so, you know, who is the lead designer? And I'm like, that's not how this industry works. That's not how any creative industry works. I learn from everybody in the room. I learned from Neville. I learned from Andy. I learned from Tim. And these are intensely collaborative projects that not one person knows what the how the final result is going to be in terms of solutions. But we all, the trick is we all need to be in the same vibe of we want this to feel like this, right? And if anything, my job is to be cheerleader. My job is to be, queen bee, sort of pollinating all the teams, going, do that, okay, great, do that, that looks great, keep going. And so it's a very collaborative thing. And so this, for me, the thing MLB influenced how I collaborate with people, and learning from people like Nev and learning from people like Frank, and watching how those room discussions happen was a huge change in my career.
That's interesting. How
about you, Andy?
Well, I mean, this was my first big attraction that I got to do.
Fascinating.
You just said fascinating.
I just said fascinating because I heard nothing.
Oh. Well, you sort of plucked me.
I don't hear him. Do you?
Oh, yeah, we hear him.
I hear him loud and clear.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
My sarcasm fell flat then.
Go ahead, Andy.
That's okay. I mean, you sort of like plucked me from, the video game and TV animation world that I was in. That I'd always wanted to work on, attractions and shows and things like that for themed entertainment. I worked at, 5 years before that, I worked at Imagineering for a little while and studied with Buddy Baker at USC and the whole thing. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it launched my themed entertainment career. I mean, I always can say that I, did the music for the Men in Black ride, and everyone knows what that is. And the fact that it's still open and running, except for not today. I was going to say open today, but
I'm gonna be in that theme park old folks home on my rocking chair watching the Oscars, watching Neville and Andy receive it. I'm like, I knew them back when I got them there.
I feel like, because, I get to
about 2 years. Go ahead.
I get to work on the theme park Oscars, it's just like, the Theas are, that's the theme park Oscars, and it's good enough for me.
Yep, exactly. Let's get a couple more questions. Somebody just asked, let me see if I can find it here.
Do you want to talk about, since you've got Yumi and Tim here, do you want to talk about the song?
Yeah, let's talk about the song. Andy, and there we go. The people who are fans of the attraction know that the beginning and end of the attraction is the 1964 World's Fair, a fictitious World's Fair attraction called the Universe in You that ponders the question, are we alone in the galaxy? With those cool posters out front that I love so much that my friend Ray Camp designed that I'll probably post sometime.
Hardcore, wonderful.
But that was organic. Like that wasn't on draft one. Originally, the front of the building was going to be the battery vent and tunnel building from the movie, which is where you walk past the two big fans. And it's just kind of, it's an industrial looking New York building. It wasn't very iconic. It's iconic from the movie, sure. But for a theme park, we're like, it's got to have some drama. But how do you have drama and also keep it secret? And so for a while, when it was the battery vent and tunnel building, the final scene became a couple of different things. For a while, it was the Orlando International Airport that Zed would zap you and send you back to the airport like you just arrived in Orlando. That was the first joke. And that was fine, but it didn't work really well. We had a very short while where we did this sort of small world kind of experience, and it was like singing and dancing from around the country and flags from all nations. And that was too on the nose Disney parody. We didn't want to go down that road. And then for a while, it was because Universal at the time was owned by Seagram's. It was the Tropicana factory tour that you were dropped back at the Tropicana factory tour. So it went through many weird versions. And none of them really landed because we realized if you haven't seen the movie and you don't know what neuralizing is, like it doesn't make sense. And so that's the challenge of attraction designs. You have to design for what we call the swimming analogy, the waiters, swimmers, divers, right? It has to appeal to waiters. People have only dipped their toe in the movie and kind of know it, but it also has to appeal to divers who know it front and back. Right. And so we came upon the idea of, well, if we bookend the attraction with something, that will telegraph to them, oh, it's that thing you saw at the beginning. Oh, they wiped my memory. It's a bit more of it's leading them to the joke a little more. And I forget who brought it up. I think it was Phil Hedema. He's like, well, but the movie takes place at the World's Fairgrounds in Flushing Meadows, New York. How about that? And instantly we were like, oh yes, because I'm a huge World's Fair nerd. Urso was watching. He runs a World's is it World's Fair Museum.com? I'll make sure I'll let him post it in the comments. Historian for World's Fairs. I actually called him about this project because I knew him back then, and the first thing I thought was, oh, we need a theme song. Like, we got to have something. And I pitched to Andy. This was pretty late in the ride, was it not, Andy? Like, you'd done the ride score already.
I think I'd done most of the score for the pre-show. And so I'd scored the pre-show in late 1999, and that was like the bulk of the work for my contract was post-scoring all those videos. But the way I remember it about the song was when I came out to visit the site in January of 2000, and we were walking the ride track, and I remember it was the day before they first cycled the vehicles, so I couldn't ride the ride because I was leaving the next day. But when we were walking the ride track for like the whole afternoon or whatever, and when we came around the corner, and you were explaining to me, like, how you come back into the universe and you unload, and I'm like, well, you have to have this song. And you're like, well, there's no money, we can't afford a song. And I'm like, I don't care, we're doing it anyway. We gotta just do it anyway. Like, it's not I'm not gonna like send Universal Creative a change order. I'm 26. What am I gonna do? I don't even know what that is. But I remember, and like we just like immediately hit on the song, and I'm like, it has to be like this Sherman Brothers, Buddy Baker song, that.
Well, talk about your experience with Buddy Baker and your connection to Buddy. And first of all, for those who don't know, Buddy Baker was a composer for Disney, for Imagineering, and did Carousel of Progress, Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow.
He was the music director for Walt Disney Studios and Imagineering for, I think, 25 years.
Yeah.
He wrote a lot of music, but he was mostly an arranger and a conductor and, music producer, sort of like the Hans Zimmer of Disney in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And, but he, right around when I was in high school, he started the film scoring program at USC here in Los Angeles. And, I went to him and I was like, I want to do music for parks. And he's like, you're in. I proved I could write music. I wrote a bunch of music in high school and, recorded with the band and like understood arranging kind of. And so I studied with him, and I got to the Sherman Brothers would come and talk to us, and we're there to answer any questions we had, and we're fascinated that there was this young kid who wanted to do music for parks, and they're like, well, why limit yourself? I'm like, well, because it's like all I know, and because I grew up in Anaheim, right near Disneyland, so I was deeply immersed in that. But so I wanted to do an homage to Buddy and the Sherman Brothers, and have fun with it, poke a little fun at it, and and we did, and then you and Tim went away and wrote the lyrics to the song like the next day or whatever, over some beers.
We did.
It's pretty close to that. I don't even know if it was beers plural. Quite frankly, we wrote it so fast.
We went to the ale house across the street from Universal Orlando and had a couple of pints and sort of drunkenly wrote those lyrics.
And the lyrics are just brilliant. The one I love is "So much to learn and so much to see, a galaxy destined for you and for me." What the hell does that mean?
It's optimism. That's what it means. Yeah. It's reckless optimism.
Well, the word reckless certainly applies. But it was hysterical. David said, "Come on, we're going to go write a song." Of course we are. So. And so we went off, and I swear it took us not much more than 15 or 20 minutes. And I'll talk when I speak later about a couple of things. I spent so much of my time on Men in Black laughing with David, and that was certainly one of the genuine things. These silly lyrics, that are adorable. But I do have to say, before we started this, I was talking to Andy and David about this. As wonderfully stylistic and that magical melody that Andy created, as wonderfully simple as these lyrics are, that arrangement is dynamite. I mean, it's absolutely sophisticated. There are multiple layers, as I said to Andy, that Torch Song Chanteuse who you put in there towards the end of it, it's just so lovely.
I'm trying to remember who that was. So the story of the recording is so I did that arrangement of the song that was all performed using samples. The whole orchestra, everything in the ride is all performed by me on keyboards using samples and synthesizers and stuff like that. My friend at the time, Debbie Lurie, who is now a famous composer, she works with Danny Elfman, and she scored the movie 9, that stop motion movie.
Oh, cool!
God, wow.
So she arranged the vocals for that, and we recorded it in her apartment in Los Angeles on one mic into her Pro Tools. It was me, her, a friend of mine at the time, Joe Haig, who went on to work for Jim Cameron as a 3D expert or something like that. I think he still does. And then this other girl, I'm looking right now at IMDb trying to remember who it was. There was this other girl who came in, and she was on Sabrina the Teenage Witch at the time. She was friends with Debbie but could sing.
Oh, cool.
And she had red hair. I can't remember her name. It's terrible. But so in an afternoon, we all, under Debbie's guidance, sang all these different parts individually and together as a group sing. And then she actually did that mix for me that is used in the ride. She did that mix on her Pro Tools rig.
And then the thing that Tim was referencing is that high soprano note at the end, which you said, Andy, is a sort of an homage to Star Trek. The soaring soprano over the end of the second half, the reprise is totally a throwback to Ima Sumac and the original Star Trek theme. Now you did play this for Buddy, right? I remember you calling me and telling me that.
Yeah, so I played it for him probably that year or later that year. I went over, to his office and played it for him, and I left him to see. He loved it. He thought it was just, just delightful, and it was like an incredible, experience to be able to be like, this is my homage to you, and it's in an attraction, and I wanted to do this Sherman Brothers, Buddy Baker kind of, happy snappy, lush, huge orchestra, for a theme park ride that, you don't usually, certainly not in the year 2000 you would get.
And it's it's so rare that you get those opportunities to, because we all work in homage and pastiche, and like it's part of our DNA. Like what Michael Chabon, or who was it, that said, all novels are sequels, influence is bliss. So it's all about taking that stuff in. And so when you get the chance to show that, I remember I had lunch with Joe Lanzisero about 2 summers ago, after we opened Scooby-Doo and the Museum of Mysteries at Abu Dhabi, which is a spiritual love letter to Mystic Manor, which is one of my favorite dark rides of all time. And he was the one who reached out to me, who saw it on YouTube, and he's like, "I loved your ride so much, and let's go have lunch." And it was the way I tell people is like, it's like E.T. touching on the nose. It's like, boop, like, there you go. You're welcome for that inspiration, and thank you for paying it back. Like, you don't get that chance a lot. And so I was just tickled when you told me that Buddy had listened to it. Somebody just asked, can we post the lyrics on Twitter? Yeah, well, we should. But you know what? That's a song. Let's post it. Let's post that with the lyrics. That's easy to do.
I agree. Why not? What? Come at us, Universal.
That's what we want to say right now. Okay.
Answering a question from earlier, Jason Depew is online. Jason was a ride operator for year 1. And if you saw my homemade theme park version, if you haven't seen that, the homemade theme park craze that everybody's doing in quarantine right now, I did my own Men in Black one. And Jason is our Agent Zed in that. So he was an operator on the ride for year 1, and says the way you always heard it, the B was meant for a restaurant. That's true. The B was kind of like, it was weird. It was yes, it would have completed the MIB. And to be honest, the MIB was in reverse, because it was the shop and then the towers on the left and then the restaurant, so that it was going to be reflected in the water, I think was the idea. Tim.
No, I was pointing at your picture is now back up in the corner there. I do want to say this, though, because I'd like to hear Andy comment on this as well. The song is wonderful, and it's stylistic, and gives me great joy to have participated in it. Talking back about the soundtrack, though, of the ride that's going on through it, what I loved about it, and I'm speaking this completely as a layman, was that kind of rat-a-tat-tat urgency.
Yeah.
And that almost industrial urgency.
Yeah.
Tick tock, time's running. We got to go.
Yeah.
And it adds to that atmosphere so much. And what also is nice is it worked in a building with that high ceiling and the acoustics that you had to deal with. What was the guy's name? Topper out of Texas who dealt with the acoustics, David?
Yeah, I forget his name. We had a couple different audio mixers that worked on this. So
There were acoustics.
yeah, that building's a big warehouse, so that's a challenge. And and that's the other thing about that kind of ride is that music, for the most part, there are some triggered scenes, but for the most part, the ride, a lot of the music is just looping in a scene. The first scene's triggered.
Well, you remember I figured it out. Since it was my first ride, I thought about it a lot, and the way I figured it out was every other scene is a loop and a trigger and a loop and a trigger.
Yes.
So that it wouldn't just be cacophony, because it wasn't the kind of ride score where you just turned everything on at the beginning of the day and everything was in sync for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
It was so it was every other scene loops and every other scene triggers. Like the ambush is, I think, the first trigger. No, the first scene one right after unload, the target practice, that's a trigger, and then the New York Street is a loop.
Yeah.
And the ambush is a trigger, and so on and so forth. And Central Park is a loop.
Yeah.
So every other scene, it seemed to work well.
I think it did. It harkens back to the stuff that does have to overlap. You were really careful about making sure that it's in the same key, so that it wasn't too clashy, or that things were very, very rhythmic or not, so that as they bled together, they felt like I think if you really do pay attention to music, it feels like a crossfade from one scene to another, and that was very much intentional.
Yeah, it worked. I mean, it works pretty well. I mean, and the style of the music Tim was talking about. One of the things that I love too about the song is that it's so different from the rest of the score for the ride.
Yeah,
it's like literally the polar opposites. Most of the score in the load and in the action scenes is this sort of trip hop kind of ticky tacky kind of score that's like more of like a video game score at the time than like a traditional like ride score or film score or TV score or whatever.
Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons I got to do the attraction. Is that's how Dave sold me. It was like, we have a video game, and he's a video game composer, because I had done a bunch of video games, including for Steven Spielberg. So there was all this plausible deniability, because I did this Goosebumps game. So if there was ever any question, you could be like, well, he's already proven with DreamWorks and yada yada yada.
I tap dance like crazy to get you hired. It was and a lot of people ask me, why didn't you use Elfman or whatever? Because you can't use the music from the movie. Re-editing stuff is very expensive. Re-editing existing tracks and repurposing them is a very, very high cost license. It's always easier to re-record stuff, and even to re-record his stuff had a cost attached to it. And
it's the same reason we can't just release the score for the ride. We don't own it.
Right.
Universal and Sony don't own the music for Men in Black and Danny Elfman, and it's probably
right. And so it was a budget thing. I always tell people Men in Black was done when Universal was still a bit the Wild West. It wasn't crazy Potter Comcast money, and so not that they don't have restrictions and budgets now. It's just it was a different kind of place, and so we had to be a little scrappier, and. So when music came up and I saw some of the limited resources, limited budget, I was like, Andy, you got to help me. But it's this big ride. So I couldn't have been happier with how it all turned out.
Me too. And, I'm still so grateful. I mean, I have a career in that because of you directly.
Oh, thank you, sir. Well, and we have still worked together. Andy worked on stuff for me at Paramount Parks and worked for stuff on me on Warner Brothers World Abu Dhabi. Speaking of which, I got a question here from Steve Silvas. Hi, Steve. How did it compare working with Universal for an IP-based attraction versus your time with Paramount Parks? Can you speak to some of the differences in culture, design principles, et cetera? Well, the big difference is an obvious one. Universal is a destination park, a global destination park that people fly to. Paramount Parks were more regional, and so the capital spend that they do on attractions was far different. The stuff I did at Paramount, a big budget, and I'm talking a big budget attraction I would work on there, like Italian Job would be you know, 8 or 9, maybe 12, $13 million tops. Most of the stuff we would do would be in the sort of $3 to $6 million range. So it's much, much lower. Where, you know, Men in Black, if you were to build Men in Black now, it would probably be 150, 175, maybe $200 million. So you can scale back and see what it costs then. It is much higher. So the design principles and culture were much scrappier at Paramount. I had a really good time there, though. They were a lot of fun to design for because of those limitations. It's like, how do we deliver a quality sort of movie-based experience, but not necessarily as a $80 million dark ride, but as a, you know, 10 or $8 or $10 million coaster. And I'm proud of the work we did there. A lot of it's gone because Paramount Parks was a subsidiary of Paramount, of Viacom. They sold all the parks to Cedar Fair in 2006, who didn't want to continue with the Paramount license. So most of those have been, most of the themes have been ripped out. More Than Thrills says $10 for those MIB boxers if they're large. Worn or unworn? I'm kidding. Let's see. What else? John Weber, are there any gags you cut that you wish now stayed in? Not that I remember, honestly. Sorry, I don't really remember. Kincaid. Oh, Kincaid Rab. Hi, Kincaid. So Andy, my friend Kincaid, who I know from online, is a composer, lives in Vegas. He's a huge theme park nerd, and he's going, oh my God. You guys are going to have to sit and talk. I'm going to have to introduce you to him because he's a really smart guy and wants to compose music, and I think you guys will get along. Darmar 106 says, MIB as a pre-show elevator. Did you have a moment of, we did it first when you rode Gringotts for the first time? Well, other attractions have done elevators. There was the Hydrolators in the Living Seas. Technically, the Haunted Mansion is an elevator, even though it's not presented to the guests as one. So, yeah, I kind of thought, well, there's another one in the same park right next door. I thought more like, oh, well, it's just, okay, whatever. It wasn't sort of one-upsmanship. It was more like, well, it gets what you need to do for Gringotts, which is get underground, right? So both attractions had the same need. Mason Shaw asks, what was it like working on Men in Black when most of the higher-ups were focused on the construction of Islands of Adventure to give you more freedom in designing the ride? Truth be told, yeah. There was so much technology and so much cutting-edge newness and new design and sort of new ideas for what a theme park could be going on at IOA that it wasn't like we were left alone. It wasn't like we were the stepkids over at the kids table that they ignored, but we were given a little more leeway, mainly because they knew how fast we had to be. Like, we were 28 months is nothing for an attraction. And so I would say there was a lot more attention from very high up creatively from people like Phil Hedema and Craig Hanna, who is now still my boss at Think Well. And they were very intent and watched very closely, but it was still very collaborative, and it was not about restraint. It was more like, go, 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 go. What's you guys know the drill, you know the budget and the schedule, make it happen. So Steve again asks, how do you work out the scale of the exterior of the attraction so it look good up close from afar? Well, that was all the architect. The architects that did Morris Architects, I believe. They, if you know the really cool Googie In-N-Out burger that's in Westwood, they won an award for that, and that's actually what got him this job. We saw that and looked at their portfolio, and they had a lot of sort of mid-century modern-looking stuff, even though the modern building. So it was really that's architecture more than set design. Inside the building is set design and theater. Outside the building is how do you make architecture work at a grand, iconic scale and a human scale. That's all them. My favorite detail of that building is the combination of exit path and shop, that sort of organic curve with the sort of indoor-outdoor planting. There's something very sort of 1960s Space Mountain Tomorrowland going on in that little part when you go into the gift shop that I've always loved. So I'm internally grateful to them for the work that they did. Let's see. Somebody, if you could do Men in Black today, I think we sort of did that one. What would you do to make it popular for today's audience? I would probably put branching paths, much more interactivity, maybe even different storylines, integrated media. Somebody did ask about media. What do I think of media-based attractions? Universal gets a bad rap for a lot of screens and attractions, and I think media is a very powerful addition to attractions. We didn't have a lot in Men in Black because we didn't really have the money. But I think when it's done well, especially when you look at new attractions like Secret Life of Pets, which I've seen video of, it's not open yet, but I've seen bits and pieces and it looks great. Mickey's Runaway Railway is so much media, but integrated in such an amazing way with moving pieces as well. As long as we stay away from the rectangle at the end of the room, that's kind of played out standard simulators. I think there can be some fun ideas. Let's see. I think that's about all we got tonight. Let me check Twitter one last time we got a couple more minutes, and we can wrap up. I think we've actually covered almost everything. Somebody said, if you could change one thing with the ride, what would you change, and what do you think is in the future for it in the next 5 to 10 years? From Stephen Temlet on Twitter. I'll end on this one. We talked a little bit about trackless and gameplay and some of how technology could change things. From a functional and story standpoint, I probably wouldn't change a thing. I'm very happy with how the attraction came out as a story-based experience, and the love that you guys bring to it is something that I'm choking up here. Something that I'll always be grateful for. I can never get past the fact that this thing lasted 20 years. Somebody asked me earlier, did you hope that it would do that? Did you think it would? You never do. You never know how these things are going to be received, right? And so when you build an attraction, and Universal in particular hadn't really had a lot of things that had lasted. In that park, when we opened Men in Black, pretty much everything was original, and they hadn't really started to change or refurbish older attractions. So the fact that we've made it to 20 years in that park when almost everything else has changed, that's you guys. That's not me. That's not all of us who worked on it. That's you guys loving it and showing your support for it. It rates so high in the guest polls. It always has. I would love for them to show it some love and refresh it. And who knows, maybe 20 years is enough for it, and maybe Universal will refurbish it and turn it into one of their own movies rather than keep going with Sony. Who knows? I have no idea. They don't keep me in the loop for that. I don't work for them anymore. But I wouldn't change much, and I think what I'm most grateful for is that in our minds, there's always going to be little mistakes and things. I can't look past some of the flaws, but the fact that people haven't seen those things and the fact that people have loved it for 20 years is something that I am eternally grateful for. And I will never have an experience like this in my career again, even after building an entire theme park in Abu Dhabi, which was 20 times the size of this. Nothing has matched the opportunity and the learning and the people I was introduced to and the collaboration I got to do with hundreds of incredibly talented people. It's never been like that before for me again. And this was my first one. I was so lucky. I'm so lucky for this to be my first attraction. So massive love to everybody out there. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter as Dave Cobb, YouTube as at Dave Cobb for all three of those. I have a ton of content. I've been going through old hard drives, and I'm finding photos and videos of really crazy like tests and installation of things and ride programming. I'm going to be posting a ton this year. And so stay tuned. Thank you so much for all the great questions. Thanks to Andy and to Tim. Come back for a quick goodbye here, boys. To Andy and Tim and Patrick for helping out in the background. For Neville and Neville for being here earlier. I'm so grateful that this attraction gets the love that it does. And I hope to see you all in 2021, April 14th, 2021. We'll be there to drink our way around the park and celebrate another year of this amazing attraction. I love everybody out there. I'm one of you. I'm a fan. I'm a nerd. And the love you show this attraction means a hell of a lot. I can't even tell you. Thank you so much.